Some Buccaneers love courtesy of Pro Football Focus. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is a mock draft Monday where we have a dueling mock draft and we have a mock draft reaction where the Bucs make a trade. All of that is coming up in a little bit, but let's start with some love being shown to the Bucs by Pro Football Focus, although I have to say there is some confusion on my part as well. So PFF dropped their top 101 players of 2024 list, and the Bucs were pretty well represented. Well, the offense was well represented, but these are the players that PFF viewed as the top performers of last season, not projecting for next season, not taking into account previous seasons. So guys like Antoine Winfield Jr., who had a bit of a down year, guys like Chris Godwin, they don't show up. They both missed a lot of time with injury, but obviously Chris Godwin would have been on the list had he stayed healthy and continued on the trajectory that he was on last year. But the Bucs had 4 players appear on the top 101. Baker Mayfield came in at number 63. Mike Evans, despite his injury, came in at 62. Bucky Irving clocked in at 58. And then Tristan Wirfs came in at 22. For Baker, they said, quote, under yet another new offensive play caller, Mayfield earned an 85.9 overall grade this season, which represents a new career high for him and ranked him 6th in the NFL. Including the postseason, his 43 passing touchdowns tied him for the second most in the league. His signature performance came in Week 18 with an NFC South title on the line as he posted a career-best 94.8 overall grade, end quote. The only quarterback in the top 101 that finished behind Baker was Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts, who, according to the setup for this list, was propelled into the top 101 because of his postseason performance. Now, for Mike Evans, they said, quote, Evans crossed the 1,000-yard threshold for the 11th consecutive season, though it wouldn't have been so close had he not missed 3 games due to injury. When he did play, he was outstanding as usual. His 90.2 receiving grade ranked him 4th among qualified wide receivers and represents the second highest mark of his career, end quote. In regards to Bucky Irving, PFF said, quote, arguably the biggest surprise from the 2024 draft class, Irving was phenomenal in his rookie season. The 4th-round pick from Oregon was the only back in the league who posted a 90.0 plus PFF grade both as a runner and as a receiver. His 90.8 overall grade was 4th in the league among running backs as well. Despite finishing with the 10th most catches among tailbacks with 47, Irving broke the second most tackles after catch with 20. That elite contact balance translated over to his rushing ability as well, as he led the league with 4 yards after contact per attempt, end quote. And then finally, Tristan Wirfs, the only player in NFL history to be an all-pro as a right tackle and as a left tackle. They said, quote, in today's NFL, a tackle's most valuable trait is the ability to withstand the relentless pressure packages deployed by modern defenses and keep their quarterback clean. Wirfs exemplified that skill in 2024, earning a league-best 94.1 PFF pass blocking grade. Not only did that lead all tackles this season, but it also ranks as the second highest ever recorded at the position in the PFF era, which is since 2006, end quote. Starting at the end here, I'm wondering how Wirfs can post the second highest grade ever at tackle, but still wind up the third tackle on this list. The math isn't quite mathing right there, but regardless, I'm not going to nitpick this list. 4 Buccaneers appear on it, and for a list that takes only into account their performance in 2024, including the playoffs, rather than previous years, projecting future years, it's nice to see the Bucs get some of the credit that they deserve. However, here's where I have an issue. Where is Vita and where is Lavonte David? Those, to me, are the 2 players from the Bucs that clearly deserve to be on this list from the defensive side of the ball, and they are nowhere to be found. You could potentially argue Kalijah Kancey, but let's stick with Vea and David for right now. So Zach Bond, Bobby Wagner, Fred Warner, and Jack Campbell were the only linebackers on the list. And this is said to treat all positions equally. Otherwise, they would have all 32 starting quarterbacks on it because of the importance of the position. So with all positions created equal, you mean to tell me that players like Julian Love, Jalen Johnson, and Garrett Williams deserve to be on this list over Lavonte David? How are there only 4 linebackers out of 101 players? That just doesn't seem to make sense to me. And not only that, but Lavonte David is the ageless wonder. Performing the way he performed in 2024 and doing the things that he did at his age, that alone means that he deserves a spot on this list. Then, as far as Vita is concerned, he was once again one of the most dominant forces in the NFL. Defensive linemen that made this list over Vita, that in this does not include edge rushers. I'll put them in a category all their own. But just defensive linemen that made this list over Vita Vea: Chris Jones, Cameron Hayward, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons, Jalen Carter, and Milton Williams. Really, guys? Really? The only one of those players that I am taking over Vea is Chris Jones. And he's been the most dominant defensive lineman in the league since Aaron Donald retired. But after him, no, I'm taking Vita Vea over every one of them. And I'm not saying that you couldn't make an argument about some of them. And I'm certainly not saying that those players aren't fantastic and aren't, Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber players. But Vita deserves to be ahead of, at the very least, most of them without any doubt in my mind. Honestly, I don't think this is a disrespect thing from PFF. I don't think this is a situation where Tampa itself is being overlooked. You can't really make that argument since there were 4 players on the list from the Buccaneers. But what I truly think the issue is here was that the defense was terrible last season. And because of that, standout players like Lavonte, like Vita, even Kalijah Kancey, they don't get the praise they deserve because the unit as a whole was so bad. This is going to be an issue for the Bucs until they get some upgrades and get out of the basement of the NFL in pass defense. Their run defense is still solid, but teams don't need to run against them because the pass defense is so bad. This is why you need that elite edge rusher. This is why you need that lockdown corner, why you need a safety and a starting linebacker next to Lavonte. Guys like Lavonte and Vita get easily passed over because the rest of that side of the ball is bringing them down. They are not far away. There's a lot of really good pieces on that defense, but it's kind of like grading on a curve, right? The bad ones really bring down the overall look of the entire group. The old cliche is you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So you get those pieces in the next 2 months, between free agency and the draft to upgrade all three levels of the defense. And then all of a sudden, this, borderline laughing stock of a pass defense becomes a really, really dangerous unit that complements a top 5 offense in the NFL. The Bucs make a trade in a mock draft. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit that clutch three, I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 170, followed by the Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 210, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 750. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. While I was going through PFF on that top 101 list, I saw that there was a new mock draft that dropped from Dalton Wasserman, where he went bananas on the trades, including a mega deal where the Washington Commanders land Myles Garrett and the Browns' third-round pick in exchange for their first and third-round picks in 2025, as well as their 2026 first-round pick. However, it was the Bucs trade that caught my eye. At pick 19, with some solid options sitting there for them at edge rusher and along the defensive line and secondary, they traded out with the Rams. The Bucs received pick 26 and the Rams' third-round pick, number 100, in exchange for pick 19 so that Los Angeles could take Michigan tight end Colston Loveland. Okay, interesting move on the Rams' part. But I don't hate seeing the Bucs move back 7 spots while picking up a third day 2 pick. With how impressive this draft is in the middle rounds, the amount of depth that they have, starting caliber players, they're going to be taken into the 5th round. The Bucs now have the ability to draft another starting caliber player in the 3rd round and give themselves 4 potential starters within the first 2 days of the draft. At pick 26, the Bucs snag Georgia edge rusher Michael Williams. And Dalton said, quote, Tampa Bay gains an extra pick from the Rams and picks up a versatile high-ceiling player in Williams. While he still needs to develop as a pass rusher, Williams can help a Buccaneers edge unit that had just one player grade above a 60 in run defense last season, end quote. Other players on the board were Shamar Stewart, who I've talked about on the show quite a bit, Derek Harmon, the defensive line from Oregon, Tyleik Williams, the defensive lineman from Ohio State, Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia, and of course, Benjamin Morrison, Trey Amos, Siobhan Revel, the corners. They were the top remaining ones, though Benjamin Morrison is continuing to fall on these big boards. Again, that's going to change with the way the workouts are going to go and everything. Right now, they're basing it off of injury, but I love this draft for the Bucs. I really, really do. This addresses edge, though not with one of the best, or not with the best of pass rushers on the board, but that's not to say that he's bad. Williams is an elite, and I cannot stress that enough, an elite run defender. He's average at pass rush, but you can see the ceiling there is high. This is the kind of move that you make because, number one, he is so good in one aspect already, but now, number two, you have Mike Caldwell coming back as the outside linebackers coach. So this is the kind of kid that you turn over to Caldwell and let him work his magic. I do not love this move as much if Caldwell isn't back with this staff. But since he is, I think this could be a sneaky good pick for the Buccaneers. And then they get that extra third because of it. That would mean the Bucs have 4 top 100 picks. They would have picks 51, 83, and 100 on that second day. But then they turn around with pick 119 on day 3. So 5 picks in the top 120 and 3 picks in a fewer than 40 pick stretch between the end of day 2 and the beginning of day 3. That is great stuff for Jason Light and his crew. You can get a starting corner in round 2, and then round 3, you find yourself with a starting linebacker and a safety. You can get a linebacker and a wide receiver. You can grab another edge rusher with that extra pick and do a little double dip and try to really build up the youth and develop some talent there at a position that is so lacking. So well done, Dalton. I love this for the Buccaneers. Some of those players that would be around at pick 100, you got safety Nick Emenwari, however you pronounce it. I apologize, Nick. Solid safety, though, regardless of the fact that I can't pronounce his last name. You got cornerback Kobe Bryant out of Kansas, who is absolutely outstanding. Wide receiver Trey Harris, defensive lineman Jamari Caldwell, safety Andrew Makuba. You're getting a really solid defensive player at pick 100 to add to whatever else you do in these other rounds, as well as free agency. Or maybe, just maybe, that third rounder replaces your own third or fourth rounder that you sent off to Los Angeles in exchange for Joey Bosa. I know I briefly mentioned this last week, but securing Bosa for this defense would be a really interesting move that isn't going to cost the draft capital that Hendrickson or Garrett will. And I think a third or a fourth is really on the high end of what the Chargers could potentially get for Bosa. He is going to be a cap casualty already. So if you send a mid or a late round pick to secure him instead of entering a bidding war in free agency, you already have a leg up. And don't get me wrong, Bosa is not going to set the world on fire. Not the way Hendrickson or Garrett or some of these other options potentially could. He has not played a full season since 2021, which is also the last time that Bosa had double-digit sacks. But if he stays healthy, or you're minimizing the amount of wear and tear that he's suffering because of the rotation, keeping him a little bit more fresh and a little bit more effective, now you have a legit weapon and a legit threat on the outside. Even though he only had 5 sacks this past season, he still made the Pro Bowl. He still had 13 quarterback hits. He was still effective. The problem is he's owed way too much money, and the Chargers are looking to unload him. If you're going to give up a pick for him, you are going to have to get permission from the Chargers to renegotiate that contract ahead of time, because he is owed a boatload of money this season. $13 million in base salary, $12.3 million roster bonus. He's got a $36 million cap hit for LA this year unless they cut him, in which case they are only on the hook for $11 million in dead money. It would be a weird deal to navigate in order to get everything in line with where the Bucs would want it as far as the contract is concerned, but it's something to keep in mind. And who knows, maybe the Bucs take the chance that, the Chargers go ahead and cut him, but then as he hits free agency, the Bucs can be enticing enough to bring him in and, be able to create the contract that they want for him. It'd probably be incentive laden. There would probably be some bonuses for number of snaps or games played because of the injury issues. But you would hope that Tampa would be an enticing enough destination for Bosa to be seriously interested in joining. But when you know that a player is going to be cut, you can offer up a late pick, maybe even a 5th round pick, and then you get back Bosa in a 6th. And that is a way for the other team to at least get something instead of just cutting him and losing him outright with absolutely nothing in return. So again, something to keep in mind. I think there's probably 98% chance that Bosa just gets cut. Nobody ends up trading for him, and then they just start negotiating with him as a free agent. But when you really want to make sure that you get a guy that's going to come in and help out your defense, sometimes you're willing to part with that late pick, or you do that late pick swap between the two teams. Dueling mock drafts coming up on this Mock Draft Monday. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Mock Draft Monday edition of Locked On Bucs, and I promised you dueling mock drafts. One, I'm going to force the issue by taking an edge rusher at 19, no matter who is available, and then the other just going with the best player available to see how the two drafts shake out. So in the first mock, this is the one where I force the issue and take edge rusher. And when I got on the clock, the players available were linebacker Jahad Campbell, edge rusher Michael Williams, edge rusher Shamar Stewart, linebacker Jalen Walker, cornerback Trey Amos, edge rusher Nick Scourton, and linebacker Demetrius Knight. Now, the consensus top player available is Jahad Campbell. He is 12th overall on PFF's big board, but instead, I have to go with an edge rusher, and after debating between Williams and Stewart, I went with Williams, who I just talked about in the last segment, but one part of his game is already up to an elite level. Then hopefully Caldwell and the rest of the crew there in Tampa can develop some more pass rush, moves, some more skill, and elevate that part of his game. So then when the second round rolled around and I was on the clock, I had edge rushers Jack Sawyer and Braden Swinson, both top 45 prospects on the PFF big board, sitting there staring me in the face, but I already had my edge. So I went with cornerback Darian Porter from Iowa State. I talked about him a couple weeks ago. This is a tall, very long corner, fits that Todd Bowles mold. And then in the third round, I had Azariah Thomas sitting there, the corner from Florida State, but having just taken Porter, I went with Oregon linebacker Jeffrey Bassa. He is a plug-and-play starter, and getting him at pick 83 is absolutely fantastic. Now, PFF dinged me for it, but I love the selection of Bassa here. This is a guy that is going to become a very hot name among Buccaneers draft Twitter. Then, for some ungodly reason, Braden Swinson continued to stay on the board. He was one of my options in the second round. It was him and Jack Sawyer from Ohio State sitting there at edge rusher in the second round. I don't understand why Swinson is still sitting there. I don't think this is a reality we will face, but taking a player with his pass rush skill at pick 119, you cannot pass it up. So now I've doubled up an edge rusher. I took Swinson. In the fifth, I took Iowa guard Connor Colby. Now, PFF didn't like this pick. They only gave me a C for it, but I love it because PFF does not take into account what Jason Light and the Buccaneers look for in their offensive linemen. Colby played left guard, right tackle, right guard, and center in his time at Iowa. So if Robert Hainsey is leaving, which we all believe that he is, Tristan Wirfs talked about it on the pivot, that Hainsey is gone. He's going to go seek out a starting opportunity. Well, now you need that depth offensive line piece that you can plug in at multiple positions. Colby fits that mold. And that was really the determining factor for me because I was looking at the Ohio State center. He's only ever played center. That's not what they're going to look for at this point in the draft. They're going to look for a guy that can play center and can play guard. Tackle's a bonus, but you want a guy that can line up at all of the interior offensive line positions. I needed that lineman that was diverse. So Colby was my guy out of Iowa. And then finally in the seventh round, Dante Trader Jr., the safety from Maryland, was my final pick. So PFF gave me an overall grade of an A-. But now let's see what happens if I go with just the best player available. Right off the bat, some of the same options here at pick 19. Campbell, Williams. Shamar Stewart went off the board a pick before me, but looking at most of the same options and some of the other best players available are not at positions of need. So this is an easy one for me. I'm going with Jahad Campbell, the linebacker, at pick 19. And then in the second round, some nice edge rushers fall to me. Braden Swinson is there again, but so is JT Tui Mo. Oh, I am going to butcher this name. I even looked up how to pronounce it before I started recording this, which is really, really frustrating. But it's Tui Moloau from Ohio State. He was an absolute game wrecker in Columbus. You got Jared Ivey from Ole Miss. He's sitting there. And then you have corners Darian Porter, who I took in the other mock. And then Azariah Thomas is sitting there. So was my guy Benjamin Morrison sitting there, staring at me, taunting me. I said I was going to go best player available for this draft. And even though I think Morrison is truly the best player available, that's not what the current view on him is until he goes and he works out and shows that he's bounced back from this hip surgery. So I'm taking JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State at edge rusher. 14 sacks last season. Just an absolute monster on the edge. And I think PFF had like some sort of failed drug test that came out right before these mocks that I did, because it makes no sense that Swinson fell to me in the third round again, but we're good at edge. Best player at a position of need, we're once again going to go with Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon, the linebacker at pick 83. That's a plug and play starter next to Lavonte David. Yeah, again, this is going to be a guy that's going to continue to pick up steam among Bucs fans throughout the draft process. In the fourth, lots of quarterbacks fall to me, which I suppose I could take one considering Trask is likely going to leave, but I'm not going to play that game right now, even though you got Jalen Milroe sitting there. Riley Leonard was sitting there, though I don't think Riley Leonard is going to make a good pro quarterback. But I got JJ Pegues, the defensive lineman from Ole Miss, Jalen Knoll, the wide receiver from Iowa State. But to me, the best player here for the Bucs, I'm going to go back-to-back linebackers, and I'm going to take Jack Kaiser. I know I just took Bassa. I've talked about Kaiser on this show a couple weeks ago, and you have to remember that he isn't just a straight-up linebacker. In Todd Bowles' defense, he is an insanely versatile weapon. He can line up at linebacker, edge rusher, safety, slot corner. He can do anything that you ask of him. So just imagine him as the defensive version of Taysom Hill in the Sean Payton offense. That's what you're getting in Kaiser. He's not going to work in every defensive scheme, but in Bowles' defense, he will be an absolute weapon. Love that pick. So we go back-to-back linebackers here. And then in the fifth round, I know I'm going to get ripped for this one. I don't care. Best player available at a position of need. You got a couple of solid running backs. You got Jaden Blue from Texas, Trevor Etienne from Georgia. But I'm taking Illinois wide receiver Pat Bryant. 6'3", 200 pounds, finished with 54 receptions for 984 yards and 10 touchdowns last season, including an incredible game winner against Rutgers, where on 4th and game, he made 2 defenders miss and walked it off into the end zone. Bucs fans do not have Aurelius Ben flashbacks. Bryant is going to be an absolute beast in the NFL. Whether Chris Godwin stays or goes, the Bucs need a receiver. This is a guy that you can rely on. In 2024, his total number of drops out of 78 targets was 1. He lines up outside. He lines up in the slot. He was the wide receiver screen guy for Illinois. He forced 14 missed tackles last season. That's the guy that the Bucs would love to add to their receiving core and add to that offense because of the versatility, because of the catch radius, the size, the speed. Love that pick. I had not seen him fall to the Bucs pick in the 5th round before, or I would have talked about him already. But finally, in the 7th round, Malachi Moore, the safety out of Alabama, 2 interceptions, 11 coverage stops last season. He allowed a passer rating of just 51 when targeted last year, and he finished with an almost 90 grade in coverage from Pro Football Focus for the 2024 season. He's not as good in run defense, but the Bucs need help in coverage. So that's where we're going to go. That's the direction we're going in with this pick. If nothing else, he can play on special teams, provide some depth in the secondary. He has extensive experience lining up in the slot, so some versatility there. Think Tyke Smith, kind of along the same lines. He's a safety with a lot of slot corner experience, gives the Bucs some depth there in the secondary. PFF also gave me an A- for this draft. It graded the pick of Campbell at 19 as a B+, even though he's the number 12 prospect on the board. But A's for Tuimoloau, Bassa, and Moore, while Kaiser and Bryant received grades of B. And then PFF knocked me for taking Campbell over Josh Simmons. The Bucs definitely don't need Josh Simmons. They are set at offensive tackle. Thank you very much. So there are some issues with the grading scale, but let me know which draft class you liked better. Again, forcing an edge rusher in the first round netted me edge rusher Michael Williams, cornerback Darian Porter, linebacker Jeffrey Bassa, edge Braden Swinson, guard Connor Colby, and safety Dante Trader Jr. And then best player available, we got linebacker Jahad Campbell, edge JT Tuimoloau, linebacker Jeffrey Bassa, linebacker Jack Kaiser, wide receiver Pat Bryant, and safety Malachi Moore. And if your instinct is to call me a homer over Pat Bryant, I challenge you to watch him first. You're going to be impressed, I promise you. That's it for today's show. Please check out everything going on over on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are following along on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts, and become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.